It's a great place to live.
Everybody says I'm coming.
Grandpa's coming?
Everybody wants to come to the US, everybody wants, the US wants to come to California.
Yeah, we have a,
California would close its borders like Switzerland closed theirs.
Yeah, or succeeds in the nation.
well, right now, we,
California is the richest country in the world. We have gold, silver, oil, water.
Yeah.
We have everything.
yeah,
The countries you're talking about, they don't have armies. That's why they're in good shape. Think about
right.
that.
So if we don't have an army and we have these resources and we had more control of them and we're actually thinking about how to integrate ourselves into the world economy, we could be maximizing our trade. You know, the best thing that got me started on this book was Governor Schwarzenegger. Just real quick. Governor Schwarzenegger took 100, 200 California business people, CEOs, went to Asia, signed business-to-business contracts, got all the paperwork up. Asian companies were ready to buy goods, including produce from the Central Valley. Schwarzenegger grabbed the paperwork, put it right on the desk of George W. Bush. Will you please approve these trade deals so that, not a handout, California companies can sell goods to customers ready to buy them today? George W. Bush sat on that for 5 years. Governor Schwarzenegger goes to new president, Barack Obama. You want to show how you're not like the last president? Would you please approve these trade deals? By the way, we're in the worst recession in the last 100 years. We're not asking for a handout. This simply allows us to sell goods like strawberries to people who have cash and want to buy them now. Barack Obama sat on that for 5 years. So you tell me, Republican president, Democrat president, California businesses linked to international trade, ready to sell them, you wait a decade before I get around to giving you approval to sell goods to customers. If California was actually thinking about itself moving into the international economy, those sorts of things wouldn't happen because Schwarzenegger personally criticized George W. Bush for that and personally criticized Barack Obama for that. But when I've made this speech in 40 California cities up and down the state, nobody's heard about that at all. The governor, a movie star, went on TV talking about making jobs in California, it being prevented by the federal government, and Californians are completely unaware. That's partly why we need to take this seriously to move into the international economy the way I'm talking, because it will force us to make a mind change where we stop losing cash that's ours. You're being prevented from making as much money as you can. That's wrong, and it certainly isn't American. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, it's a great idea. How are we going to get this past Sacramento? The people in there have no mindset at all for doing anything for help California. I mean, they're continually
Lowering taxes?
yeah, there's no way. The people that we elected and stuck in there, how are we going to get that mind change in those people?
There was a gentleman here who asked me that question about 5 months ago. And my response was this: what standards do we set for California politicians? You only got to do something flashy. You don't actually have to improve the education system. You just have to look like you're going to. You just say, I'm going to do it. We don't have benchmarks for our politicians. They don't actually have to achieve anything. So if the California people said, we want to move as integrated as we can be into the international economy, and that is our #1 litmus test, and if you don't meet that, you don't get elected, well, now we're doing something that we have never asked any of our California politicians to do since maybe Pat Brown 40, 50 years ago. Yes, please.
You could blame either president, Bush or Obama.
As far as California is concerned, they're both the same.
Okay, but the poor suckers, they have no say over anything. Who runs our country are the multinationals and lobbyists. There's 20 lobbyists. There's 535 Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, and there's 20 lobbyists to each person on the Hill. And they're walking around with suitcases full of money, and that's how our country runs, is on money. Just like water, you follow the money, and that's where the water goes.
So we would,
That's what's happening here in California with our water.
yeah, so
Where the money is.
So what we would do was we would move the federal authority over trade and maybe immigration to the state level, where we make decisions on it, and where our businesses only have to go to Sacramento to get approval instead of Sacramento and the Fed and 20 different lobbyists. And while that may sound radical, the fact is that the federal government has already given up federal level authority on environmental regulation, insurance regulation, climate change regulation, car standards, and now NASA has said that California can be the only state in the entire union to have its own NASA program. We're already taking over certain federal roles. We're very selective about it. So let's just continue that trend a little bit and empower ourselves to make ourselves rich. He had a question.
Just wondering how this integrates with the opposite, the other direction, which is the, familiar with the term the world is flat, is that very few countries have ever been invaded that both have a McDonald's. Because the Indians are making the parts for the Dell computers, and they can't disrupt things too much, or they take themselves out of that.
They said the exact same thing about Hitler's Germany in 1930. There were reports by British economists, we are far too integrated into the German economy for us to ever go to war. That's never going to happen. Oops! Putin just invaded the Crimea. Go ahead and do a trade embargo, America. Does that sound like he's really scared about a trade embargo? People are logical to an extent, and then they become emotional.
We're being told that that's a big hammer.
It's not anymore. And we're not in a position to use it. That hammer that used to look like this looks like a little tack hammer now. But your presidents aren't telling you that, and none of your politicians or leaders are mentioning that to you. You no longer have the big stick. You got a tiny little stick, and all you really need to have left is being whisper and talk nicer, which you're not doing.
And politicians that aren't respected. Politicians that are not respected,
Well,
aren't by other people.
our politicians aren't respected?
I don't think they're respected by other countries. They're not afraid.
Politicians maybe not, but California is.
Okay, but
Foreign
why-
countries
why
love
do you think
California.
California deserves, we're last, we're number 48. We have not set a good example. And what makes you think that if all this economy came into California, they're still going to take most of the money? They're not going to pass it down to anybody else.
Because we don't have, what I'm talking about would double or triple the budget. You have that much money, yeah, we can put some into education and funding. We're barely making the budget meet now. Expand that thing 300%. Yes, there'll be graph, and yes, some of the politicians will take some cream off the top, but there's so much money that yes, some of it will have to go into infrastructure. You're not going to be able to say, look, here's $1 trillion, oops, it accidentally all got washed away. Some of that's going to actually go to improving the state. Yes, the politicians aren't as efficient as they need to be, but they're not going to be able to siphon off $1 trillion. That's just too much cash, and this economy is going to be so large, some of it's going to have to go into that.
So what are your first 3 steps to get this implemented? What would be the first, second, and third moves?
The first move is to let everyone in California know that this idea exists. Get the people talking about it. There's something called 6 states of California right now that's getting the news. That's not well thought out. There's not much to it. He certainly doesn't have a book. I went to his website. Tim Draper, 6 states, he's got a flyer worth of information. I got 300 pages. So if a half-cocked idea gets state attention, maybe a really thought-out idea should get the same amount of attention as the 6 states thing, and then you'd actually have an intelligent dialogue in California. And when just 10% of this state knows about this idea and is talking about it, this takes on a life of its own. But the bigger idea is have an initiative. You can have an initiative where you can order the legislature to do a blue ribbon panel. Blue ribbon panels when the legislature does an official investigation. Do an initiative to force the legislature to do an official investigation into this book, and if it's possible. The moment that happens, and you have the state of California issuing their own version of this, that's state, local, national, international attention, and this is taken on a life of its own. Those are the top 3 steps. I think I got to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. He'll be available for questions.